Welcome back. This has become our favorite podcast of the week. This is our free-form, anything goes, Freaky Friday podcast.
Fun Friday, too.
Oh, we're calling it Fun Friday?
Yes.
All right.
Possibly freaky.
So what we do on Fridays, and this is only the third or fourth show we've done like this, and people seem to really like it, is that we talk about the things that Julie and I were listening to on podcasts and talking about and studying during this past week to keep our brains elastic, keep our brains frosty, to make it so that the monotonous, never-ending sea of real estate information doesn't become overwhelming, and we keep our ability to digest new information, even sometimes countervailing information, at the forefront of our brains, because we want to always be checking our precepts, not just about the things we believe to be true about real estate, but also the things we believe to be true in general. There's certain things that, of course, we won't question because we're resolute that, those beliefs and those structural, foundational things in our lives will forever be the way that they are. But a lot of other things, we are more than open to having our minds opened, right?
Yes, that's right. And we welcome stories and questions from you, all our listeners as well. Maybe you'd like us to go down a particular rabbit hole that you're interested in.
So I'm going to start out by saying there's been a lot of talk on just starting out with some real estate stuff. And then on my list of things, Julie, I don't think we'll get to all these things. I want to talk a little bit about the pardons that happen. I wanted to talk about the just released, or I think they got released yesterday, JFK, MLK, RFK files. I want to talk about UFOs.
Of course.
Okay. I've got on my list more information about Fannie and Freddie.
Yes.
And what that's going to do to the mortgage industry, and really why there's any resistance whatsoever about releasing it from conservatorship. Because I did spend a lot of time trying to understand, because I can't even find a logical reason why, anybody wouldn't want that to be, those companies to be public entities again. Interesting information on interest rates.
Yep.
Yesterday Trump was saying that, interest rates needs to fall, and these are the reasons why, and he insinuated that he knows what's going on more than the Fed. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to talk about tariffs. Now, not all those things today, probably, but what's on your list?
Pieces of that. I did some more research on the proposed freedom cities. So I've got some bullet points on that as well. And then just some various other thoughts that I'll weave into your list of things as we get our discussion going.
All right. I know you're really going to love the UFO section.
Yes. Oh, but first, I do want to give a shout out and prayers and hopes and our thoughts to those of you dealing with the California wildfires. I was fortunate enough to be asked to be on a panel where we were talking about how agents can be leaders. Remember, you and I did a podcast about a week and a half ago, right after the original round of fires in California. And one of the things we talked about was obviously put on your own oxygen mask. First, take care of yourself, your family, your pets, etc., but then what you can be doing in your community. So if you haven't listened to our podcast from last week about that and you are being affected by those fires, we're thinking about you guys. We're here to help you. And one of the things that my private coaching clients are doing to help each other, we've got clients in Las Vegas and Phoenix and surrounding areas. They're all sharing available inventory and homes to rent, because I'm getting reports that there's like 40 applications for every available house for rent in parts of Southern California that were not affected. So, these people are looking for temporary housing. If you can help out, reach out to us, send me an email. If you're a Premier Coaching client or one of my private clients, make sure you're involved. But I just wanted to say that at the top because that's in our thoughts.
And we did do a podcast about that. If you want to listen, I think it's a week or so ago.
Yeah, about a week and a half ago.
All right. So I'm going to start out by saying that we wrote a white paper for all of you that we want to give to you for free. There's been a lot of bluster about the changes that have happened to TCPA with regards to telemarketing, with regards to texting and all this stuff. And I read all the articles and all the different usual real estate headline grabbers like Inman, and Inman's article was decent, but it didn't go very much in depth. Housing Wire did one, a lot of different things. Julie and I knew about these changes probably about mid last year when we started talking about them, especially as pertains to TCPA, the TCPA rules, and lead selling. And so we wrote a white paper. It's quite comprehensive. We used AI to make sure it was as accurate as we possibly could make it. And it's available for you for free. This is something that if you're a broker or a team leader, or if you are a content creator yourself, we encourage you to grab it. The only place I'm going to publish it is on our newsletter. So if you want to get it, you've got to subscribe to our newsletter, harrisrealestatedaily.com. And it's a double opt-in newsletter. So just you have to put in your email address when you go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. And then you have to pop over to your email and actually double opt in and confirm that you want the subscription. But the article is called, or the white paper is called, Mastering FSBOs Expired's SMS and the TCPA compliance, and it's a real estate agent's guide. So definitely get hold of this. It's going to be something people are probably going to talk about a lot for the next, I would imagine, next month or so. Then some other real estate headline will pop around and distract everyone. But we'll tell you this for all of our prospectors. You definitely want to be reading those articles and reading the changes as pertains to expireds and for sale by owners, but I will give you a little bit of reprieve so you don't have to be nervous about it. Effectively, it's business as normal. Just read the specifics, and I included some scripts in there and also an FAQ, so definitely subscribe to our newsletter by going to harrisrealestatedaily.com. All right, Julie, let's roll right in. And I want your opinion on this because this is one thing we hadn't talked about this week.
Okay.
But I found myself having these conversations with several people at the gym and walking around our neighbors and
Sure.
Different Zooms I did this week. I had a ton of Zooms. So what is your take on the pardons? Like all the pardons, not necessarily, let's just start from the outgoing administration pardoning everybody and their brother, quite literally. What's your take on the pardons?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing that we talked about a little bit was what even is a pardon. It doesn't mean that you're just sealed off forever. No information comes out. They actually have to, if you are pardoned, you do have to show up and be questioned. Is that accurate?
Well, it is, but more specifically, it pardons them from in the date range that the pardon is for. So if it was for 5 years, it goes back 5 years, but it ends on the date that the pardon was issued. It doesn't it doesn't save them from future liability of things that they might do.
It doesn't protect them going forward, and it doesn't protect them from things prior to the original stated date. So it's just that like 4 or 5 years or something.
Right. And from what I understand to what you're just saying, the pardons are makes it so that they have to testify. And now that they can't use the Fifth Amendment because, the saying things that might, so they don't have to. They can actually go, I think legally, again, we're not legal experts, but I just wanted to start out with this because it is kind of interesting because a lot of, people are getting, I think, really confused about it. So if someone was given a presidential pardon and they were called to testify, they have to tell the truth about the questions that were asked, whereas before maybe they would have used the Fifth Amendment self-incrimination, right? Now when they have to tell the truth, if they happen to lie after they're given the pardon, then that's a new infraction, and then they can go after them for the infraction of having lied under oath. You guys get it? So basically, I don't really, in my opinion, my own opinion, and I'm curious about this, I'm not glad because it's injustice, really, but I am glad in the sense that it will make it so that we don't have to constantly be relitigating, quite literally, the last 4 years, that the country can move forward. And I was really thrilled to hear Trump say that he wasn't planning on deploying the legal system as lawfare against the Democrats, and then the Democrats took the extra step of basically pardoning themselves from anything that might, be in the crosshairs. And personally, I'm glad because I'm tired of hearing about all of it.
I would say I concur with that. I'm relieved as well because I think the never-ending back and forth and the lawfare on both sides, and I was glad what you said. Trump said he's not going to do that. He said that in his inaugural speech that we are done with that. That's one take on it. The other one is because they do have to answer questions. They do have to show up at court, answer the questions asked truthfully.
Well, assuming they are, right? There might not be any actions taken whatsoever.
Assuming it happens. I'm sure it'll be different for different folks. But maybe there will be some transparency and information that casts some light on some things that were spun a certain way. I don't know. But overall, I would say letting the dust settle and moving forward with bigger, better, more important things is congruent with the new golden era. I think I would put that in that bucket is we're going to get away from that whole going after each other constantly back and forth and move forward.
Well, so there's other ways, just for the record, to punish people who are essentially, being unscrupulous, especially in the government. For example, do you guys remember that we did talk about this yesterday, Julie, that Steele dossier? No, the Hunter Biden laptop stuff
fiasco
that came out. And they had over 40 supposed security experts and CIA people and all these other people that signed saying that this had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Remember that?
I do.
I don't know if you guys caught this. So those people are kind of exempt from whether they told the truth or not, whether they're being political or not. So let's set all that aside. But what Trump did is he revoked all their security. They have no more security clearances. So all the people that signed their names to that, every single one of them, they lost their security clearance. Now, in Washington, D.C., we have a lot of coaching clients and have had a lot of coaching clients. everyone basically has a job, and the government has a security clearance, and you have to have very high security clearances to obviously have the better, paying jobs. So if those officials, air quoting here, don't have security clearances, they can't work in Washington, D.C. in any meaningful way. So what's effectively happened is they've not just been fired from their jobs. They don't have those jobs anymore. They've been fired from their ability to work again in Washington, D.C. in any capacity that would require them to have any sort of security clearance. So there are going to be so those of you who are, and again, I had someone one of our friends actually said that they thought I was wrong because there's a miscarriage of justice because those people who committed these crimes are never going to be held accountable to them. And I think maybe that's true, but also there will be ways they'll be held accountable to them, just as an example of what I just said. Yeah. So there's going to be, I think, a fair amount of banter about the whole pardon things over the weekend, especially since Trump went and pardoned all those January 6th people.
Yeah.
And did you know it was that many?
I did not know it was that many. It was like more than 1,500, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
incredible.
I didn't. I guess I had thought about it as maybe a couple hundred tops, but 1,500 is a lot of people. Some of you live in towns of 1,500 people, so put it in perspective. And then I believe that the worst offenders had their sentences commuted, which means they're being re-looked at to, maybe they'll be pardoned, maybe they won't. So it wasn't a blanket pardoning, even though it was a lot of people. There's still a handful that are being scrutinized. So we'll see where that goes to.
And I think it was a handful. And these are people that did probably commit crimes. They did attack police officers, and they did do things like that. But I don't really think it was more than maybe 20 or something.
Yeah, I think it was.
But it was
less.
pretty nasty, really. But overall, the reality of it is that there was a lot of people that were thrown into the bucket that probably shouldn't have been.
Sure, but that also shows some level of accountability and scrutiny, that it wasn't just, hey, if you were involved in J6, you're all off the hook. There's this group of people
But this is the end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that
he's trying to make a clean slate, I think.
Well, the January 6th committee, all those people were all pardoned. Okay, so presidential pardon, Joe Biden. But in addition to that, it turns out that virtually all of the documentation that they used internally, their records and their files and all the rest of it have been destroyed. Did you know that?
Yeah.
So they destroyed it.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, illegal too. I mean, I think it's civil crime or something like that. So the moral of the story is that it's unbelievable. This is a joke, and I'm going to get some hell for this, but I don't care because I still think it's
Warning.
funny. Do you guys remember those T-shirts that used to have that kids wore when it basically said, my parents went to Disney World and all I got was this lousy T-shirt, things like that?
I remember those.
Well, I want to make a T-shirt that says, I survived 4 years of Joe Biden and all I got was this lousy T-shirt.
Exactly.
Come on, that's funny,
You'll
right?
Get some arrows from that.
I mean, it's satire.
Well, let me turn the ship back to the pardons, because there of course there is a camp of people that say, well, that's not fair, they should be punished, they were treasonous, blah blah blah. Remember that happened more than 4 years ago, and these people have already done a lot of time. So if you're of the camp that say, that wasn't right, remember that they were already in prison for quite some time. So there's that.
Right. All right. So let's move on to some more interesting things.
Sure.
If you don't have anything you want to bring up.
Well, let me do a little bit of real estate here with the Freedom Cities thing.
Let's
because
talk about that.
we want to keep things pretty energy and enthusiasm.
Again, this is literally the list of things that Julie and I talked about this week when we weren't working. So
our collection.
You guys might just be feeling like you're getting to know us more and realizing how boring we are. Or you're really into these.
We got aliens coming, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we got aliens coming. Stay tuned, exactly.
So let's talk about Freedom Cities and then maybe tariffs, and we'll sprinkle them with aliens too. So there has been some talk from President Trump about these things called Freedom Cities. Now, what is that? I did a bit more research on that. His proposal is the creation of new urban centers. Now, it's quite specific, actually. He wants to have 10 new cities, and this is part of the potential solution, or at least contribution to the housing crisis and prices being so high, et cetera, et cetera. It is specific to federal land, and get this, he's actually proposed a contest to design these cities and to win the bid to be one of those 10 freedom cities. And the decisions will be made based on innovation, efficiency, the raising of a standard of living, the cost of living, so, getting the best standard of living for not an insane price, and making these cities as technologically advanced as possible. In fact, before Trump was elected, Senator Mike Lee had a Houses Act. It's actually called the Houses Act. Was under proposal, which would allow states and local governments to purchase federal land. His example was in Utah. 75% of Utah is federal land.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and also if you live in Utah, you know that your prices there are high as well in the towns that are already built, and you've got a housing crisis there. You don't have enough inventory. So these two things together, the idea of freedom cities, the competition to win one of those 10 bids for the 10 new cities, and then the Houses Act is something that I'm watching because I think that's pretty interesting. Obviously, this will tie into new construction and what builders are able to do and the deregulation. We talked about last week that 25% of the price of a new construction home currently is in red tape, regulations, permits, et cetera.
You know, you said that, and I researched it, and I was really shocked to see that that's been cited numerous places, and the numbers that I've seen published were as high as 30%.
Yeah, I think in California it's like 30.
It is incredible. So the idea that, there's a lack of housing shortage, housing prices are too high, and all this stuff, and then when you really peel back the onion, you see that essentially up to 30% of all the cost of a new home goes into basically paying for all the regulation. That's extraordinary.
It is.
And if you want to talk about a tax on consumers, there it is. You want to talk about something that's causing inflation in housing prices, well, there it is. Because if new construction is more expensive by 30%, I got news for you folks, so is resale. So it just brings everything up. It's more just evidence that really, hopefully, we're in an era where we're going to be leaning out the government quite a bit for allow the animal spirits of the U.S. economy to really run free again.
Exactly. And consider the fact that 25 to 30%, does that really create any value in the home? That's just absorbed by the price. That's not like, you spend an extra 25% and you get, an upgraded version of your windows and you get a landscaping package. No, that's just baked into the red tape of even being allowed to break dirt.
So I would like to talk about something a little bit along the lines of what you were just saying, tariffs. So I spent a lot of time researching this because frankly I didn't know anything about tariffs.
Yep, and it is a hot topic right now.
It is a hot topic, and it's going to become more of a hot topic because of what I'm about to describe to you guys. So I couldn't figure out why Trump was so gung-ho on tariffs. I couldn't figure it out because from what I can observe about Trump, he generally speaking is, he's not saying, well, he'll say random things for sure. But when he makes a policy statement like this, it's because he's really thought through it, but he never shows all of his cards. But he gave us some hints, didn't he? He said William McKinley. Okay, there was a hint, so I researched using that. Mm-hmm. Then I researched tariffs. Then I did all this other stuff. And I'm going to share with you guys what I found, and then I've got some notes that I'll use to validate a thesis that I'm creating with regards to tariffs. So did you know, William McKinley was a president, obviously, and well, maybe not so obvious, right?
Well, he was a president. He was from Ohio. My parents went to McKinley High School.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was he known for?
Well, he's known for tariffs. He was also assassinated too.
Yeah.
But William McKinley was known for tariffs, and William McKinley was the first one to realize that you can essentially pay for your country, you pay for your government by charging essentially what does amount to an indirect tax on all imported consumer goods. And I got to thinking, what happens or what would have to happen? And this is where I think Trump is going. So you guys can remember you heard it here first. I think Trump is going to announce, or he's going to say, with the correct, essentially rolling out tariffs, that it will eliminate the U.S. federal income taxes. Because when McKinley, some of you right now are peeing your pants with glee. But let me validate what I'm saying. So when McKinley was president, there was no federal U.S. income taxes. So with no federal income taxes, then obviously we paid for all the things through tariffs. Now you're saying to yourself, well, holy shit, Tim, that means that the tariff rates are going to have to be super high and everyone's costs are going to go through the roof. Well, let's talk about that. I researched what percent of total consumer goods in the United States in 2022 and 2023 were imported. What would you guess? So I know everything seems like it's made in China, right? But dear listener, what would you guess? What percent of the things that you consume are not made in the United States, if you had to guess? Well, I got a number for you. It's 27%. I also found some other facts or other statistics saying it's even less than that. But let's just go at 30%. Let's round it up. So 30% of all consumer items are going to be tariffed. Now let's talk about, and this is probably exactly what's going to happen. And the tariff rate, if I remember correctly, it was less than 30%, but somewhere around 25%. I've got it in my notes, and if Julie wants me to drill down, I will. So if 30% of all consumer items are essentially, the price increases by 25%, then you're going to see what are the unintended positive consequences. Because if you watch CNN or MSNBC or read most things, they're going to tell you that this is just going to skyrocket consumer prices. It's going to skyrocket consumer prices on 30% of the items that are imported. But guess what? There are mountains and mountains of positive unintended consequences of tariffs, which I found incredibly interesting, starting out with the fact, obviously, that we could eliminate the U.S. federal income taxes. Oh, by the way, the average taxpayer in the United States, which is certainly not everybody, pays around 13%. So if all the tax-paying folks in the United States all of a sudden had an additional 13% in their pockets, this is an unintended consequences. In other words, they all had a personal income boost of 13%. And that's a meaningful amount of money. What do you think they're going to do with that money? Well, they're going to spend it. It's going to go back into the economy. Right. So here's some interesting and I have all the unintended consequences here, Julie. You can read some of these too.
Sure.
But if you, hold on. Can you get in my Mac?
Yep, I got it.
Okay, there it is.
Yep.
Right there. You can participate so I don't just basically banter. But yes, so here's one of the unintended consequences, for example. So if right now what happens is a lot of these foreign countries are able to produce things for less than the United States for a whole variety of reasons, and then they import those, and sometimes they'll import those items into the United States. Steel's a good example, losing money on the sales, but they're trying to get market share and put U.S. business put U.S. industry out of business and make U.S. industry dependent, or make the U.S. economy dependent on imported steel, as an example. So what they'll do is and this has been documented. This is essentially 100%. You guys can research this yourself, but that's typically what happens, and that's the reason that a lot of this, world trade stuff is a little bit dubious, because it's really not being done fairly, and that's what Trump's real gripe is. So, when in his first term, he was saying, "Well, we're going to tariff things where you guys are obviously undercutting, trying to basically cheat the U.S. government or U.S. Industry." Now, what he's saying is there's going to be a tax on all imported goods. And so, I'm guessing it's going to be around 30%. And it's only 27%, or let's say 30% of all consumer items are, imported goods. So it's not everything. What's that going to do? It's going to cause, and this is what's already happening. I think this is just so amazing. Trump's been president for a week? And now all these companies that make things are saying, to avoid the tariff, they're going to open up manufacturing facilities in the United States. I mean, how batshit crazy is that? So instantly, you're going to have a boom again. And where are you going to build these big manufacturing facilities? You're not building them in the heart of L.A.
I know. You could put them in those freedom cities.
Exactly. You guys get it? So what's going to happen is we're going to see a slew of foreign companies that are still opening up manufacturing facilities in the United States. And they're going to be happening in places where there's going to be obviously low regulation, places like Ohio, Ohio is way ahead of the curve right now, it seems, on welcoming some of these companies to build their facilities there. You're going to see where there's going to be a lot of potential employees. They're not going to be building these, in the desert between Reno and Las Vegas, right? Because that's just a bridge too far. But you are going to be seeing them building them in, again, Julie and I are really familiar with Ohio because we used to live there. But there's tons of places in Ohio where there used to be manufacturing, where there's still a lot of potential employees that they have to drive to Columbus or whatever. Those are where we're going to see the new boom towns, in addition to what Julie already said.
Bedroom community type stuff.
Right.
And so you're talking about job creation. Tariffs on imports can incentivize those companies to relocate their production back to their home countries, leading to job creation in manufacturing and supply chain industries. You mentioned steel, aluminum, textiles, automotive parts, other goods are under that potentially. And there is an example when U.S. tariffs on solar panels and washing machines came in 2018, that did create some investment in manufacturing facilities from companies like LG Electronics, Whirlpool. These are all big employers. So, of course, more jobs means better things for the economy.
And you have supply chain issues, too. So if you basically are look what happened during COVID, and we really learned all about supply chain. How many of us even knew what the hell a supply chain was before COVID, right? Cars weren't being able to be sold because they couldn't get little silly chips to control the, rear view mirrors and all these other things. So clearly that showed that we were stupid in how we are handling our own supply chain. So if you put the manufacturers, even if they're foreign owned in the United States, well, then you're keeping a lot of things, close to home, and that's going to eliminate the probability of us having another huge supply chain issue. We left ourselves vulnerable because this sort of mythical idea that we could just be one happy family across the globe and do world trade. No one really took into consideration that the world's full of a lot of people that don't necessarily have everyone else's best interest at heart, right? right? They have their own self-interest and their own country self-interest, and they're going to leverage that opportunity to, get the better of you when it comes to resources and things like that. But we can go on and on. As far as that, there's going to be a lot of, let's think about this. So if you are making, I don't know what it is. Let's just use the old overused term widgets. So you're making widgets and you're in Peoria, Illinois, and you've been in this widget making business forever. You're a third generation widget family, whatever. So you can't expand your business because right now the widgets, you're competing against foreign made widgets, and the foreign made widgets, they're not as good as yours necessarily, but it doesn't matter because most people are willing to buy the cheapest, best thing that they can. That's how consumers ultimately decide what they're going to purchase for the most part. Now, all of a sudden, the foreign-made widgets can't undercut you. The foreign-made widgets now have to compete with you, and your widget is actually better quality. Your widget's going to win. That's going to fuel you, increase your demand. It's also going to give you, essentially the motivation to expand your widget-making business. You're going to hire local employees. You're going to expand, all because the level playing field from tariffs. And remember, the tariffs are in essence voluntary because when you go to the store, you don't have to buy that foreign-made product. You guys remember, a lot of you, when we were growing up, frankly, where it used to say "Made in America." Remember that? Made in America. When's the last time you saw Made in America on anything? Well, we're going to see a renaissance of Made in America labels, and that's going to mean something. And that's going to be something, I think, for a lot of us, it's going to harken back to an era where the level of optimism and the level of
enthusiasm, patriotism, American spirit, all of that kind of thing, the innovation, the things that founded the country. I think maybe you can speak to the potential impact to income taxes and offsetting some of that with the tariffs. And I was reminded, I looked this up too, we live in Puerto Rico, we pay tariffs all the time on imported goods.
Oh, tons.
And to your point, yeah, I do like that it's voluntary versus, a imposed income tax that's this percentage because we're told we have to do that, right? So, for example, when you bring a car in, we pay a big tariff on that voluntarily, or you could buy locally here from your Puerto Rican auto sales center. So it is voluntary. And I think to your point of Made in America is going to mean something again. And of course, that goes right back to jobs and creation.
So again, this type of tax is voluntary. It's not mandated. And if you think about if Trump can, and this is what I haven't read this anywhere, but I think this is what's going to happen. Going back to, the original beginning of the rant here is that I believe that you're going to hear Trump starting to talk about when these tariffs. So first of all, the tariffs are going to be rolled out, and they're going to roll them out on the most innocuous places where people don't really feel it or notice it. And then he's going to start talking about all the increases. It's what, external revenue service, right?
Yes.
They're going to start talking about all the external revenue that's being generated at tariffs, and people are going to say, "Well, shit, I thought the tariffs were going to be in the end of the world, according to MSNBC. Everyone's going to be, So it turns out that wasn't true. So tariffs, maybe that's okay. And then what you're going to see is the tariffs are going to increase on the things that are a little bit closer to home. So tariffs are most likely going to be issued in the industries where they can be absorbed the most and hidden from consumers the most. I'm going to guess from a optics perspective, if I were rolling it out, that's what I would do. And then I would slowly turn up the bailiwick on, give the more consumer-facing companies that make stuff for U.S. citizens, imported items, I'd give them a little bit more of a reprieve and then really roll into the tariffs if they weren't willing to comply. But I bet you I'd be shocked if you didn't discover that virtually every single item that's imported won't all of a sudden magically be starting to be made in the United States, including luxury goods. And I'm going to give you guys an example. Did you know, like Louis Vuitton purses, right? Louis Vuitton is a big French company. It's a big part of a massive conglomerate, MVLH, I think.
I think that's right. Yep.
Yeah, and it's owned by I think the world's third richest guy, a French guy. I'm hoping I'm remembering all this correctly. In any event, do you guys know that those are made in near San Diego?
Not all of them, but a lot of them. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. I think there's another manufacturing facility in Nevada. You're not supposed to know about it, Like, they don't brag about it because you're supposed to be thinking these are made by artisans in the French countryside as they milk their cows and make brie cheese. I have no idea. Wearing the berets.
Does that happen? Maybe it does.
Maybe it does. Yeah. Can you do both?
Oh, I don't know. But is that an example of a French manufacturer bringing it to the U.S. and making it here?
Well, not only that, but it's evidence of the fact, and this is even before the tariffs.
Yeah.
But it's evidence of the fact that you can, even luxury brands will start bringing their production facilities to the United States.
Now, related to that, I don't know if you heard, he's only been president for 5 days. So yesterday, I believe, President Trump was at the World Economic Conference and said, this is related to tariffs, he said to all these world leaders, here's the deal. If you bring your manufacturing to the U.S., we're going to have really low taxes for you and low fees, and we're going to make it really easy for you to manufacture your goods or products, services, whatever, in the U.S. That's his first thing. Come here and make it, and we're going to make your life easy. And then, of course, the second part was, if you don't, we're going to tariff the daylights out of you. Just so you know, guys, here's the new deal. So it's not just that, here's, big bad, President Trump saying we're going to tariff the crap out of people. There's a flip side to that, which is bring your manufacturing to the U.S. We will make it easy for you.
And again, if you do the math on this, and I have to look through my notes to find it, I actually had one of the AIs help me sort all this out. I don't need to read it to them, guys.
Okay.
You guys wouldn't find it that interesting. But it is actually completely feasible that tariffing, as Trump has proposed, would allow the U.S. to no longer have a federal income tax.
That's right.
Which means there would be no federal income tax, which means no federal income tax. If you weren't clear, that means no federal income tax. So I want you to think about that. And again, remember the average U.S. citizen who does pay taxes, and not all U.S. citizens pay taxes, they pay a 13% tax rate. And in California, if you have a salary, for example, of, I'll just choose a number, $1.5 million, you're actually between state, federal, all the rest of it, you're paying half of your income to taxes, with the largest portion going to federal income taxes. Well, if that's eliminated, it's not like most people, what are they going to do? They're going to go shopping. They're going to put more money in the economy. They're going to be reinvesting. They're going to be doing things like that. So this is what's really exciting about the tariff thing. So when you're hearing something and you're realizing that, damn, this news source seems very biased, bad, do your own homework and do some research. Now, I have to say, when I was doing this research, I used 3 different AIs, and with ChatGPT, it gave me some kind of dumpster fire, very political talking point information initially, like it was just reading it from a press release. And so I went after it, and I literally told ChatGPT that I'm tired of the political talk. I said, I think I even used the term dumpster fire content. It apologized, and then it came back with stellar information. And matter of fact, Julie, and I see you're scrolling through my notes. Mm-hmm. Did you get to the part where it actually offered its own opinion on whether it worked? I think
I'm getting there. You had a lot of back and forth with it.
I know, exactly.
Trying to get some good, juice out of the AI assistant here.
Well, it's because all these statistics, look at all these numbers that it has, where it's talking about consumer price inflation, where it's talking about all the risks that potentially might occur. And here it is. And during this phase, I'm showing Julie on my computer when I was really trying to whittle. Well, it's because I wasn't content with it giving me these, flat answers, and I wanted to really drill down and give me the numbers. Like,
oh, there's an equation for you.
Yeah, well, it's because I wanted to know the equation. I wanted to know the tariff versus
what was required for the, So I think the question is, how much do we have to bring out of the tariffs to offset the federal income taxes, and is that actually a feasible thing? And I think that the conclusion was it is potentially. It's going to take a while to get there, but yes, it could happen, or at least to reduce your federal income tax obligation.
I even asked it to figure out, like, what would the tariff rate have to be in order for there to be no federal taxes, but maybe if there were federal taxes, if it could be a flat rate. And then it told me.
Oh, this was interesting.
Well, it told me, but then I asked the question in the wrong order. What I should have asked was, what percent of consumer items are imported? And it said 27%. Mm-hmm. Well, with that in mind, and then I said, well, with that in mind, how could we completely eliminate the federal income taxes by just doing tariffs? And then it came out with some magic. If you guys want more information on this, I'll fish this out of my long chat chain.
It is interesting, though. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on this podcast, so we can do another topic if you want. But I think it is fascinating.
But here's the question I asked Julie yesterday as I was explaining all this to her. because, again, I find it very fascinating. Like, first of all, why the hell hasn't anyone else had this idea before? There's the obvious
Other
question.
than McKinley, yeah.
We're by far the biggest, most powerful country in the history of humanity. As far as, like, if you're going to be placing bets on long-term winners, it's going to be the United States. There just is no question about that. So if you then ask yourself, what would be, like, why would you not want to do this idea with regards to tariffs? Why would you not want to have all the benefits of charging tariffs? And I can't come up with an answer, but why would anybody want to keep the current tax system as it is? Why would anyone want to keep it the way it is, where essentially it's been used as almost a political social lever to punish this group of people at the benefit of these people?
It's very divisive and very, very expensive.
And hasn't that actually caused some erosion of essentially the very fabric of our country by allowing this tax system, the progressive tax system, which has really caused a lot of animosity, the haves and the have-nots, and sort of, I think, in a lot of ways, maybe given fuel to some of the Marxist doctrine that, the creators are the ones they're making money, and the Elon Musks are the ones that are, you guys, a lot of you're only successful because you're exploiting other people. And have you ever had these, sort of unintentional, you pick up these vibes from other people that, oh, you're only successful because you took it from somebody else, or you've read it, or maybe you even feel it.
And you're also not paying your fair share, you evil rich person.
The whole bullshit about the rich not paying their fair share and all of this. In some states, like Connecticut, if you look at a map of Connecticut and there's this tiny little dot in the middle of Connecticut called Greenwich, Connecticut, Greenwich pays all the taxes. The residents of Greenwich pays all the taxes for the entire state. And if you look at the percent of taxes that are actually paid by people that earn, I think it was over $300,000 per year, it's almost all the taxes in the United States is paid by people in the upper echelons. And here's the thing that's interesting. If you were to, for example, if you are a business owner and you are looking for ways to expand your industry, provide more jobs, build more creative things, there's a reason, guys, one of the many reasons, but there's a reason why we haven't really innovated in 10 years. Can you tell me the last time anything came out of Silicon Valley that was something that, social media, what the hell, right? A next iteration of an iPhone. AI, it's been at least a decade since there's been anything really innovative coming out of, really any kind of thing for all of us to be proud of. I think about that. Isn't that crazy? When we were growing up, there was technological innovation after technological innovation. Look what happened to space travel after the 1960s. 1970s, really. What happened? Why did that stop? We need to get back to thinking big. We need to get back to the manifest destiny.
Well, people are calling that the founder's mindset, which means two things. One is founding fathers' mindset. I mean, think about how, for example, the election went. That is largely because of how the founding fathers set everything up to make sure that the power was with the actual citizens. But the other way to look at the founders' mindset is what you were talking about, the founders of new companies, new technologies, innovation. AI is certainly a huge thing. That's another hot topic about the announcement of the big investment in AI. What are they called? Innovation center, where they keep all of the technology. I'm tripping on the word for it.
It's what Trump said yesterday. There's right now we're underproduced. There's
not enough electricity to create the AI.
Right. So there needs to be 50% more energy that's produced in the United States to basically become the global leader in AI, which means just from that very thought, think of all the different industries that are now going to emerge to create more energy.
Yes.
It's incredible.
And jobs and cities and all of these things. Interestingly, it's been stated that Texas and Arizona are already fully set up electrically to support such things. So if you're in those states, keep your eyes peeled because it might come right to you.
The point I was trying to make before is because every big business started as a small business, but if your incentive structures that you have in place, and let's just use taxes as an example, basically makes it so that you have less of an incentive to build your innovative business because you're seeing all your would have been profit going out the window, and that profit you would have used for reinvesting and just paying your own damn bills.
Right.
If all of a sudden the incentive structure is so biased towards not being innovative, that's exactly what happens. So what you need to do, and this is the reason that Florida, and this is the reason that Texas, this is the reason that Tennessee.
And it's the reason that California has a net loss of all these business owners leaving because it's become so onerous.
It should be obvious to all of you. If you are able to go and sell real estate in a marketplace where essentially the incentive structure there is more conducive to you essentially expanding your business, you're going to do it. How many of your decisions, and this is not the way it's always been. I'm old enough to remember that you didn't make decisions when you were, and maybe 20 years ago, around things that you make decisions around now. Like right now, when you're thinking about investing in a business or starting a business, one of the first things you think about is what are the regulatory hurdles? Like, okay, that is a really kick-ass idea, Bob, but let's talk about, Julie and I got pitched on something the other day, which I thought was a really cool idea. But then my mind immediately went to all the government agencies and all the red tape that's going to go to basically inhibit this thing from ever happening. We were thinking about investing in another business. It was in the mortgage space, and it, essentially where an investor, an entity would basically become an investor with you in your business, in your single family house. They would take an equity position in the house. They would give you all or part of your down payment. You obviously had to be creditworthy. And then when you went to sell the house, which you then decided you could stay in it for 30 years, they got a certain percent of the upside of the house. So they basically made a long-term investment. Well, I thought that was a great idea conceptually. There's some businesses that have tried to do that before. But then I started thinking about all the regulatory, it's a little bit like a reverse mortgage. So who's going to be you guys get the point? So if businesses and investors are having to think about regulation and taxes as their primary filters before they decide to invest in businesses, what does that do to business innovation? What does that do to startups? There's a reason why some of these countries are starting to absolutely dominate in innovation. It's because they don't have all the regulation. So when you hear, Trump say less regulation, that's what I'm talking about. You guys are living. So if you've only been selling real estate for 10 years or less, you don't realize how onerous your job has become with all the added paperwork and layers of complexity. When Julie and I got into real estate, there was a wad of paperwork, but it's probably at least 4 to 5x as big now. And all the things that, if you're in a state that has all these other extra layers of regulation, it's extraordinary.
It is.
So hopefully we're getting past that. But there's a lot of other benefits from, essentially charging tariffs. And if you guys want me to share these notes with you, I'll put them on. Well, you know what I'll do is I'll just cut and paste these and put them in Harris Real Estate Daily.
I think that this is going to stay a talking point for quite some time going forward.
Well,
as
people
they
are
get
going to be
implemented.
confused about it.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to clear.
There will be a lot of opinions about it.
Well, I was confused about it. So, I don't want real estate. I don't want our podcast listeners to basically be manipulated into thinking, into following suit with the political talking points. And if you guys haven't noticed, a lot of the political talking points of the losing party right now aren't based in logic. They're based in basic emotion from having lost. So they're not like taking a real deep dive into what I hopefully just exposed you guys to as far as the positive benefits of tariffs. They're just saying Trump bad, tariffs bad.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it.
That was actually one of my thoughts that I had this week was as people recover, almost half the country recover from their guy didn't win or their gal didn't win, to make your decisions based on fact, to your point. First of all, tariffs are paying the extra price for something that's got a tariff on it is voluntary. It's not going to be across the board. It's on 27% of imports. So there's that. And then what are the results of that, right? So to not make your judgment or, the talking points from the legacy media, for example, based on a judgment of the personality of Trump. You might not like him. He's a flawed character like everyone, right? It's the results-oriented approach that he has, right? So remember that we all hired a businessman to run the country. He's having business thoughts for profitability. That's a different approach than we've had in the past. So when you're considering how to think about things like tariffs, remember to stop short of saying, well, I must be bad because I don't like Trump. Don't look at the personality of the person who's proposing it. Look at the results that it potentially will get. So I think maybe for some of you listening that are having that approach, oh, I don't like it because Trump said it. Well, use the it's too soon to tell mentality and give the country a break to turn the corner and make some changes.
Well, I personally like his personality, but that's aside.
But you know what I'm saying?
I do.
People are quick to judge just because he said that.
Right. And so ultimately, where does all this go? With tariffs, it's going to it's going to encourage, obviously, revitalization of U.S. manufacturing. It's going to create a lot of new jobs. It's going to make bust towns all of a sudden in boom towns. It's going to make parts of the country that arrogantly have been referred to as flyover are going to become boom towns.
Yeah.
It's going to create a wave of new opportunity and innovation. And really what's exciting, it's going to bring a lot of things that are U.S. companies that have been creating things overseas. They're going to bring those companies, that manufacturing back. And really what we're going to see, which is really badass, is we're going to see a lot of manufacturing come to the United States that are, it's foreign owned. It's like Louis Vuitton, the example I gave you. It's like BMW in Spartanburg, South Carolina, things like that.
Foreign investment in the U.S.
Exactly. Isn't that what we want?
It's great.
And, that's exciting. And I think hopefully everyone should see the benefit in the real estate industry. And
yes. As real estate professionals, put this on your radar. Be frosty about this, as we say. When you are scanning, you've got your Google News set up, who is going to be building in your town? Think relocation, think new construction, think people moving from foreign countries. There's a lot of that goes on. There's certain towns where that's a fairly normal occurrence. But for some of you, that's going to be a really new thing. How can you help those people? And,
lots of presidents other than McKinley were pro-tariffs. Alexander Hamilton, who was a Federalist, Abraham Lincoln, used tariffs, and obviously now President Trump will. So this could make for a massive change in just basically the overlaying health of the economy and the stability, frankly, of the economy. All right, now let's move and let's talk about something else. Julie, there has been a big release of all these, previously declassified files, and it's it's so funny. I can't remember a president that didn't promise to release the JFK files.
Everybody talked about it,
and none of them did it.
No.
And I didn't understand why they didn't do it. And of course, the conspiracy theory people that was a feeding frenzy for them.
Yep.
And Trump actually said why they didn't do it.
Oh, tell me. I'm behind on the story.
Okay. He said, and this is the reason a lot of this stuff hasn't been declassified. He said that some of the people that were directly affected by the JFK files in particular are still alive. That's what he said.
Okay.
Now, I'm not really sure if that meant an investigator. I suspect what it meant was a witness that was giving testimony, and they were doing it secretly or they were doing it anonymously. And those people were still alive, and their actual names are of record. And so I'm going to guess that those people that contributed to evidentiary, back in the day, those are folks that the government was thinking maybe since we originally agreed not to disclose their names, maybe we just keep to that agreement despite public opinion. I'm going to guess that's what happened. So evidently, one person from the JFK files is still alive. And so they released everything, and this is just my theory, okay? But they released everything but any identifiers for that person. Okay,
so they get to remain anonymous.
So I have questions for you.
Did they not release anything related to that person, or did they release the information but not that person's name?
Right, that.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
So the latter. So what do you suspect? Have you ever studied, how much time have you spent on this JFK thing?
I mean, not a ton, but we've watched some movies about it and stuff like that. I mean, I've always felt, as I think most people do, there's probably some underlying things that we don't know about.
Okay. So
I guess I just have a natural curiosity about it. Was there only one shooter? Who was behind it? Was the assassin funded by somebody in particular? Those kinds of facts. Why did this happen? Was it actually an act of our own government? And if that was true, then why? Those types of questions.
Right. And so there must be some layer of some of the conspiracies must be valid, or they would have released more information sooner. But that said, the flip side to that is it's very possible that the people that want to believe there's a conspiracy will always believe there's a conspiracy no matter how much information that they have.
Could be.
Because some people they
like that kind of thing.
They like that kind of thing. It's their hobby.
They're probably into other conspiracies too.
Totally. You can't just believe in one. You have to believe in a bunch.
Sure.
But we are in a day and age where a lot of the conspiracy stuff that people were really persecuted for are now finding themselves to be right, to be validated. And I think that's kind of fascinating because what we're learning, and this is what my conspiracy theory is about conspiracy theories.
Okay.
What's really trying to be protected is the means that essentially the powers that be have historically used to
the suppression of the information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not just saying you can't read it, but some of the disinformation they've done to make it so that if you even think it, you're supposed to be an outcast. And I think that for decades, generations,
sure,
it's humans, U.S. citizens there was a long time when people just inherently trusted the government.
Right.
I think that started to change in earnest probably after Vietnam, but we really didn't see it changing significantly until I think the government was trustworthy for the most part in the 1980s. But Reagan did something, the same thing that Trump's doing. Mm-hmm. Reagan was the president. You guys notice what Trump's doing? It's kind of genius. He's keeping himself as the outsider. He's like talking about the government, even though technically he runs the damn thing.
Yeah, this is an interesting line of thought, by the way. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, it's clever. Mm-hmm. So he's going to keep himself as an outsider, as a critic of the very thing that he's running, which will always give him immunity to, in essence, not legal immunity, but it'll always give him immunity of public opinion, I think. When the government does something wrong, they're not going to blame Trump because he's the one that's battling essentially the deep state, as it were, which turns out, remember when everyone was saying the deep state's just some conspiracy theory? Well, I mean, maybe there was no, mahogany covered room with a bunch of fat bald guys smoking cigars, that everyone kind of visualized with that sort of ridiculous name, deep state. But definitely makes sense there's an administrative state. Have you been to the DMV? I mean, it definitely makes sense that all the things that he's experiencing, all the things that are going on in the states and the federal government, that a lot of those folks have sort of worked together to kind of, go about doing things on their own because there's so many of them and they're so the deep state, as it were, the administrative state really does. Well, guys, who's been running the country for the last 4 years? When, arguably, and we're going to hear more and more stuff about this, and it's going to be shocking, scary, horrible. But we're going to learn that Joe Biden really was asleep at the wheel for long periods of time.
Longer than people realized.
Some of the people in his administration now are air quoting leaking. They're just ass saving is what they're doing. And they're coming out and saying, well, I was in a meeting with Joe Biden. This one came out this last week. It was like 3 years ago. And I was telling him about the fact that Joe Biden, you signed something basically prohibiting the export of natural gas, LPT, or I don't forget what it's called. And Joe was like, no, I didn't. And the guy said, yes, you did. And I guess this was in the Oval Office. It went back and forth quite a few times to the point where the guy said, I will go out to my desk and I will show you that you did sign this actual thing and you can see that you signed it. So he didn't even know that he had signed something that was either limiting or restricting the export of natural gas. He didn't know it. How many other things were like that? So I'm wondering if we're going to find out, essentially a lot of the government's been run that way for a long period of time. I can pretty much guarantee you that that's definitely what we're going to discover.
For sure we will, because if you look at the epic amount of executive orders, many of them are not exactly like, here's what's going to happen. A lot of the executive orders are Trump is ordering a certain department to have 30 days to investigate and report back on this, what really happened with this. So that's one of those things that is out there in terms of what you're talking about. We're going to get a lot more information back. And to go back to our previous point here about Trump having a unique perspective, we all, the country hired him to do a job, right? To run the country. But as the president, I think of him more of the president of the people. He's more truly like a representative who's observing this stuff happening up in the government and reporting back and then saying, okay, here's what we found out. Here's what I plan on doing about it. Here's maybe an executive order, what we're going to take action on, which is a different position than most of our previous presidents. I think maybe Reagan was a little bit more like that, where he would talk to the people a bit more.
Reagan, back in that era, Julie, there was not this whole executive order thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
it existed, but they didn't use it.
Right, they didn't use it. Trump signed over 200 executive orders, essentially reversing virtually everything that the voters did not want to have part of their country anymore. Mm-hmm. DEI and all these other things have just been eliminated. And, there's not, guess what? We're only going to be flying in front of federal buildings. The U.S. flag, not every flag. There's flags of foreign countries flying in some foreign federal buildings in some states. It's bonkers how things have gotten this askew. And again, I feel sorry for of course, I'm going to venture a guess that the millennials are the ones that are sick of it the most.
Possibly.
Yeah, even though that they've never been exposed to a country that's any other way, they probably really have gotten pissed off about how things have gone because they're the ones that are getting screwed the most.
Yep.
The younger generations, if you guys are listening right now and you're up in arms a little bit by some of the opinions that Julie and I are voicing, you're the ones that are going to get hurt the most if things don't radically change because you're going to be the one that ends up carrying the burden. And if the doomsayers are right that we're in the final throes of the country is a dated Roman Empire, all these other things that people frankly the Marxists and the liberals love to say, if they're right that that's true, what does that mean for your future? So you're the ones that need to be fighting the hardest, basically, for changes because you're the ones that are going to, benefit the most from some of these things that are starting to be put in place. This isn't about social engineering. This is about basically, as frankly, Trump loves to say, about winning. And it's not just winning for the haves; it's winning for everybody, and that's what's really extraordinary.
Well, that is extraordinary. And again, we go back to the thought that that the judgment as these things come out should be results oriented, not personality based, because there is this feeling that everybody lives in the country. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. These things are to benefit everyone. Economic benefit is for everyone.
Well,
right?
Don't judge a man or a woman by what they say. Judge them by what they do.
And the results they get.
Well, exactly. That's the what they do part. Because everyone says a bunch of stuff. Everyone says they're going to do this, move heaven and earth, and they're going to become the greatest thing since sliced bread, blah, blah, blah. If you don't believe me, just look on any social media platform, right? But look how many of those people actually do something. It's virtually nobody. In Texas, when Julie and I lived there, we heard cowboys would occasionally say, tall hat, no cattle. And that basically means somebody that acts like they're something that they're not. Because, tall hat, no cattle, the way you have wealth traditionally in those, parts of the world, or the more cows you have, the richer you are. So it's kind of an old saying, but it's definitely true. So look, just wrapping a bow around the whole release of all these government files, I suspect what we're going to find, and really the reason that they've been suppressed isn't because we're going to discover any new information about who done it. I don't think
probably not.
They're not murder mysteries that are finally going to get solved. I think it's going to be the tradecraft. That's not even the right word. Of the federal agencies to try to suppress information is really...
That's probably going to be the story more than, some crazy conspiracy thing.
Right. That's really what they don't want to have exposed.
Yeah, and let's clarify. You were talking a lot about JFK. This was all put into one bundle, which was JFK, his brother RFK, and also Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
So those are three different things, and I don't know if there will be something unique to any of them in particular, but... to me, the overarching theme is, okay, this is something that we've all been talking about, watching movies on, guessing about, creating conspiracies about conspiracies. Maybe this is another thing we're all going to put to rest as a country and not have to talk about for the next 3 or 4 decades, right? I think there's a lot of that going on with some of these investigations, and transparency is becoming a theme.
Well, just really maybe spending too much time on this, but who's benefited other than what I suspect from essentially all these files being so secret? Who's benefited
that's a good
from
question.
the lack of release? Well, that's how you can almost always,
that's going to be the story too.
People always say follow the money, but if you really want to get to the heart of it, like ask who's benefiting from this particular outcome, and that'll always kind of shine light in corners that don't want to have light shown in them.
What's the saying? Sunshine is the best disinfectant.
Exactly. So yes, I think that's what we'll discover is essentially a lot of I think long-held secrets about the inner workings of the government and how to control information, and that's really truly what they've been trying to protect. And I seriously doubt if we're going to have any sort of smoking gun or revelation of what's actually been happening. And if you'd like, let's move to UFOs. You have something else to add?
I was going to say, speaking of conspiracies, what have you got on UFOs?
Okay, so let's talk about that. Now, just as you and I predicted, and I think it's hilarious how quick people have stopped talking about those damn drones.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what the hell?
They're still around, though.
Well, but that was topic du jour a month ago, and now nobody talks about it. No. But I also think it's interesting. Now, Trump's going to say what those drones are all about. But what's also interesting is that, they weren't from a foreign, well, even I would say they weren't from like China or Russia, and they weren't from a foreign planet or, interstellar, because all they had to do is say there's no, drones that are going to fly over the inauguration, or no drones are permitted to fly over New Jersey anymore. And sure enough, the drones stopped flying. So I'm kind of guessing that if it were really some kind of adversary, either a, a celestial one or interstellar one, that they wouldn't have given much of a rat's ass about a notice from the FAA.
Well, we know that they at least read English, so there's that.
Well, but so this goes
Whoever
back,
it is.
This goes back to my theory. I think what they are is that they are essentially U.S.-based military drones, and the reason they have crazy shapes is to block radar.
Seems very logical to me.
Yeah, it does. And because, they were saying they can't be picked up on radar, we can't see them. Well, there's been all kinds of drone warfare stuff that's been kind of perfected in really heinous, horrible ways over in Russia and Ukraine, all that. Hopefully you guys haven't stumbled across any of that.
Well, but so let's say that that's true, that they are homegrown and they're that shape because of the whole radar non-detection. My next question would be, okay, let's accept that could be the fact. We'll find out soon. What are they doing? Why are they flying around everywhere? What's the point of it?
I don't have real strong opinion on that. But if I were to have one, I would guess that if you were to explore where they weren't just, I don't think they were just Jersey and New Jersey folks, let me know if I'm wrong. But I think that they were flying near what would have been very fortified military or, other type of installations. And they were probably testing, so if you're, Lockheed Martin, let's say, and you've made all these funky looking drones and you're wanting to test as to whether or not there's any technology that can essentially detect your drones, you're probably going to field test them by flying them over a nuclear power plant, or more specifically a nuclear silo, or more specifically an actual active military base or something like that. And you're going to want to see how humans actually react, but more specifically, you're going to probably want to see how the technology that,
are they detectable? How close can you get?
Right.
What can they? What kind of intel can they gather?
Right, and they're evidently very hard to shoot down. So this is kind of an interesting. Now, and the next question people are going to have, and you and I talked about this, I think, a couple Fridays ago, is why don't some of these make noises? And I'll share with you guys this story again because it was so badass, frankly. When Julie and I used to live part-time in Laguna Beach, and we were down above the Montage, in a condo above the Montage. And there was back when it was not near. What year was that, Julie? 2004?
Maybe 4 or 5, somewhere in there.
So somebody was on the beach and put a laser pointer into the cockpit of a commercial airline, because what happened out of John Wayne, or I think they called the airport something else. Hopefully they go back calling it John Wayne, right? Yeah. Anyway, so sometimes the jets would take off from John Wayne and they would do a U-turn over the ocean, and then they fly over Laguna Beach as they went to their destination back east, right? So some moron was on the beach and took a high-powered laser pointer and basically lit up the canopy of a commercial airliner. And this is the story that we heard the next day. But people that lived on the beach and people that were actually in the Montage said not only did a whole bunch of unidentified military type people show up, but there was a helicopter that they actually didn't even know it was a helicopter, but there was something flying over the ocean, not so close to the beach, and they couldn't hear the damn thing.
Yeah, I remember this because you could only see some lights on it, and it almost appeared out of nowhere.
It was completely in stealth mode. Yeah, and so this was a big-ass troop-carrying helicopter that made no noise, that was barely visible, and you could kind of see it because the sky was backlit with stars, so you could kind of make it out. We didn't see it. This is what people have told us that they could see. But you couldn't hear shit.
We didn't hear anything.
Right. Yeah. And so no one knew what the hell it was, and the story got dropped. And then you heard about Osama bin Laden, and you heard about these stealth helicopters that the SEALs were using when they went in to get him, right? That's what one of them was.
So we know we have some badass stuff.
So we have some badass stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we want to make some, and I'm going to nerd out a bit. I didn't, how can you make I forget what helicopter it was. Someone's going to tell me in comments. But there's a SEAL base down in, obviously in San Diego, and so that's supposedly where it came from. And how do you make a helicopter that's that big and makes that much racket normally? How do you make it in stealth mode? So what they did is they created, you guys know how, this is so crazy. Get ready. You know what noise-canceling headphones are, right? If you don't use noise-canceling headphones on a plane, you're missing out on the greatest experience ever of not actually hearing people around you. No offense, Julie.
Much less the plane.
Julie's a chatterbox. She always sits next to me, so I always put my noise-canceling headphones
real nice.
on. Yeah. Anyway, so noise-canceling headphones, what they do is they cancel the noise, obviously, by muffling your ears, but they also create frequencies that essentially your ear can't hear the noise that's there.
Cool.
The noise is still there. It just, there's a noise that counteracts it. I don't know how else to describe it, but evidently that's what this damn helicopter could do.
So maybe that's all it is. Homegrown, really cool stuff.
Well, that's what I think it is.
We'll see. We'll see whether your analysis stacks up when it's all released, but I bet you're right.
Well, but does it...
It's logical.
There is a lot of, again, that everything I just said, get ready for this, could be part of a very elaborate cover-up from the government to make it so that people like me and like you will write off what truly are signs of visitation, interstellar visitation.
Oh, that could be.
Yes, to the things that I just said.
Could be.
So I could be the fool here, getting manipulated, piecing all these things together.
This is all fine. Don't worry about it. It's
exactly.
just our stuff.
Which are nothing other than the breadcrumbs that they left out there for people to find.
And maybe that's what created the technology, was it came from somewhere else.
Yeah, but this could be a ruse to make it so people can rationalize that we haven't been visited and that those aren't truly UFOs.
Okay, well, this brings us full circle to some potential things that maybe we are going to like about the new administration being more transparent and telling us about some of this stuff. If you guys haven't noticed over the past 5 days, we've probably had more communication out of Trump than we had, over the past several years. Just letting us know, like, okay, here's something we're looking at. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're investigating. And here's what I propose we do about it. I think that's nice. I think that's good. It reminds me of fireside chats that Churchill used to do in the UK during the war. He used to, just say, here's what happened today. Here's where we stand as a country. I like that. I like the transparency. I like knowing what's going on. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be, addicted to political stuff. But, I think that we do all have a civic responsibility to participate on some level in our own country, especially since it's the greatest country that we, that's out there. So
as of this year, you and I have a combined age of 109.
Thanks for the reminder.
I can't remember in my entire life where I felt this optimistic about the potential of the country, because never before have we had somebody so willing. It's not just Trump, it's the people he's pulling in around him. Now, we'll have to see over time how they gel.
Time will tell, and there will be some mistakes made, and there will be some weird stuff said, and we'll just, move forward.
All right, now I want to talk about one more thing.
Sure.
And this one I've really studied. And I want to give a disclaimer before I talk about this one. And Julie and I have talked about this a lot. So I want to talk about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Yes.
Is that a cool topic?
Yep, all good.
Okay, so first of all, Julie and I are not investment advisors. We're not telling you to buy Fannie or Freddie. But we should disclose that we are, and we have. And we do have equity in Fannie and Freddie. And we started buying Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac back in 1993 or 4. So
some of our first real estate money.
Right. So we have a fairly decent amount of equity in all those entities. Now, so remember I told you that, and run it through whatever filter you choose to. We're not financial advisors. So just a quick history lesson. Fannie and Freddie, in essence, are the reasons why. First of all, they're government entities originally created basically to make it so that there could be 30-year fixed rate mortgages. 30-year fixed rate mortgages, and I think other mortgages products that are going to come as soon as Fannie and Freddie start becoming public again or privately held again and not government entities solely owned by the government, you're going to see all kinds of new mortgage products come out. So when you talk about the cost of housing, we have a lot of variables that Julie and I have talked about. 30% of the expense goes to overregulation. We now know that a lot of the expense that are incurred in mortgages that people are saying that's just what the cost is, that's because of a lack of competition with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And there's a lot of other specifics that I'll get into here in a second. But it was 16 years ago, the Obama administration put Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac into conservatorship. And at the time, they were really screwed because all those mortgages that they'd guaranteed went south. So what happens is Fannie and Freddie, in essence, I'm oversimplifying, but they guarantee or they buy the mortgages from the issuers, and thus making it so the issuers will have more money to lend. And also without a 30-year fixed rate mortgage that Fannie and Freddie will agree to buy, there would be no 30-year fixed rate mortgage, because from a lending perspective, doesn't really make much sense to lock in $1 million on a house and have the person pay you, say, 6% for the next 30 years, because you can make a hell of a lot more money with that $1 million than you probably will on that mortgage, okay? So Fannie and Freddie were necessary to create the resilient housing market that we have. And a lot of politicians, and no one talks about that, but essentially, along the way, they said, well, everyone should be able to get a mortgage. Oh, screw, we don't need credit. You don't need to have credit. You don't need to have a job. And guess what? That didn't work out.
At all.
And then all a bunch of other things happened. You guys have hopefully studied what led up to the housing crash. Long story short, Fannie Freddie did need a bailout. They got a bailout. They went into conservatorship. They paid all the money back, plus, if I remember correctly, another $130 billion to the federal government. So the loan has been more than paid back, and the loan was paid back really quickly. In addition to that, I think it was, they don't do this now, but up until recently, the profit that Fannie and Freddie were making were being swept over to the Treasury Department. So essentially what had happened is Fannie and Freddie, and I think Julie's busily away. She looks like a cracked up squirrel right now, typing away, trying to find numbers. But Fannie and Freddie are this is what's shocking, one of the most profitable companies on planet Earth. I believe they're the third most profitable company per employee on planet Earth. And those entities just basically print money. And if they were publicly traded, if they were at a conservatorship, I think Fannie Mae would be the largest company or one of the largest companies in the world based on market cap, based on the volume.
It has a net income of $17 billion. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit of money. And that's a 35% increase from the $13 billion it earned the year before. I mean, it's super profitable.
And so there's a lot. Let's just break this down. So essentially, those were privately held companies that the government took over. And, just remember when all the bailouts were happening? Well, they bailed out Fannie and Freddie, but they never let the companies go independent again. So those companies have basically been zombie companies for the last 16 years. All the while, they're printing money. So now seems like there's a lot of political motivation to bring those companies private again. And it looks like it might be done through an IPO. So I'm going to give you guys some actual numbers, and you can research this yourself. So right now, Fannie and Freddie are trading for $5 to $6 a share, and there's reasons to believe that the conservative estimate on the actual day of IPO, which some people are guessing is going to happen the next year or two, is going to be $34. All right, so that means that there's going to be a great return of investment, and you're seeing a lot of investors piling in. Some really, really big billion-dollar hedge funds and stuff are starting to pile in. Well, New York Stock Exchange recently said we're going to welcome Fannie Mae back to be publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They basically meet all but one of the requirements. And so you're going to see these companies, and this is one of the things that Trump said he was going to do. You're going to see these companies be released from conservatorship, become publicly traded again. You can buy equity in them now, by the way. Some of you are going to wonder about how to do this. You can buy it over any trading platform. Charles Schwab, Ameritrade, doesn't matter. You can buy it anywhere. I think they're over-the-counter stocks, but you can still buy them. So you're going to see these companies. They're going to go. Let's just say Fannie Mae does indeed go public again, and it's a new IPO. It's released. The shareholders are going to be made whole. You're going to see a lot of people that have the common stock in FNMA are going to get very well rewarded for their investment. All this, and then what's going to happen? The banks have already said that they're going to want to get into the same overall business that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac has. They haven't up till this point because there's been essentially a monopoly on that industry. I'm oversimplifying it, but just trying to make a point. So by keeping Fannie and Freddie in conservatorship, you've done what the government loves to do. They've tried to control the supply of mortgages, the terms and the nature of the mortgages that are being issued. So some of you will remember 20 years ago, for example, there are mortgages, like when you had a borrower that wanted to, get a mortgage, you'd say, well, this is a government-backed mortgage, and then this is not a government-backed mortgage. And the government-backed mortgage, generally speaking, had lower fees. Do you remember that, dear listener? Yeah. They had, the paperwork was less onerous. There weren't all the, a lot of you guys, if you have a house for sale and you got a buyer who wanted to purchase your house using Fannie, Freddie, or even VA, and you had another one that's conventional, as well as I do, you'd want to lean into the conventional with all other things being the same, because the conventional one didn't have the same level of costs. Like a lot of these mortgages, the seller has to pick up fees, and then there's the stinking appraisal and all these other things. So getting a government-backed mortgage was more. It was easier credit wise and down payment wise for the borrower. But essentially from a competitive market situation for all other parties, it really wasn't as good of a deal. And so you saw a lot of these non-government backed type mortgages that were issuing mortgages, and that was really popular for a long time. Now try to find one. Try to find a mortgage nowadays that's not basically a Fannie Freddie loan. They don't exist. And do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think they control 85%, might be 90%.
Right. That's if there was a mortgage company, if Wells Fargo had 95% of all the mortgage market, there would be every sort of monopolistic, trade busting.
Break them up. Yep.
Exactly. That's what happened. But that's exactly what's happened with Fannie Freddie. And you don't think that they've used that as an opportunity to drive up costs? If you don't believe that, you're naive. Of course that's what happened. And also, they haven't been innovating. That's the reason there's no new mortgage products out there. There could be so much innovation in the mortgage space. So many, with more competition, dear listener, what happens to rates? What happens to fees? They go down, right? I mean, you're going to have to come out with more innovative products. Your cost of originating a loan is going to go down. Interest rates are going to go down because you're going to charge less, you're going to make less money. All these things. That's called competitive market forces that don't exist now. And yet, this is what's fascinating to me. You have people out there who are saying that Fannie and Freddie should stay in conservatorship, and these are the reasons why. And they state that the average cost of a loan will go up by $1,200, and there are all these other things. But when you read their research, or do what I did, run it through different AIs, you're going to find that their research is based on nothing other than hyperbole. They're making it up. So there's no real valid reason to believe that having Fannie Freddie go private is going to increase the cost of mortgages. It's just a lot of people who call themselves economists who are essentially saying that that's what's going to happen. But the number, like I said, is less than $1,500. So even if they're right, I don't think that really much matters. That'll get absorbed one way or the other. But what's the real reason why these people, and mostly Democrats, sorry, I know you guys are, some of you are going to get your, not like me saying that, but it's true. Why is it that they don't want Fannie and Freddie to go private? Why? I want you to ask yourself the question. What's their motivation? Follow the incentive, right? What's been happening to all the profit? What's been happening to all the money? I have researched, and I don't freaking know.
And it's billions and billions. We're not talking about a little bit.
It's billions and billions.
They've way more than paid back the initial debt. It's something like 4 or 5 times that.
Yep.
We're talking about like hundreds of billions.
Well, and again, they're still, sweet.
Yeah.
What's happening to the profits? Not being paid to dividends. Shareholders aren't getting anything.
No.
So essentially, the government took a private entity, robbed the shareholders. You and I own equity since the early 90s.
Yep.
And we're not the only ones, obviously. Robbed American citizens who had it in their pensions funds and their firefighters' pension fund and their retirement fund and all this, and just robbed it, and then still been robbing it for 16 years, and blocked competitive industries, blocked the essentially industry from creating new products. What have they been doing with the money?
Yeah, I looked that up too, and supposedly it's just going into beefing up their reserves. But seriously, how many reserves do you need?
But their reserves have already, yes, that's what they said.
I'm saying.
But if they do an IPO, the reserve requirement, but Dodd-Frank, they more than exceed the Dodd-Frank requirement. Sheila Baird, who ran the FDIC, said they're more than ready to go public again. All these other, these people.
Ackerman said the same thing. He said there's more than a war chest full of reserves.
Right. Well, so the money's been flowing back to the Federal Reserve. And so what's the Fed been doing? This is the only thing I've read that makes sense. And where's that money been earmarked to go? That's where the trail gets lost. We don't know. So the money and again, if any of you know more about this than I do, which I hopefully somebody does, please do tell me. But where's that money been going that's been coming out of Fannie and Freddie?
Because that will answer the question potentially of why they would not want it to come out of conservatorship.
Exactly. And so the theory is that money's been flowing to essentially,
pet projects or what have you.
Exactly.
Right?
Green new energy and things like that. That's the theory. I don't believe it until I find some validation of it, but it does make sense that that's where all this money has been going. And that does then make sense why the people who've been benefiting from that flow of money don't want that spigot to stop. It's essentially become a honey hole for certain carved out chosen entities.
Because there's no other real answer to that.
Right. But look who's hurt. Look, obviously shareholders have been adversely affected. The cost of mortgages, you cannot tell me the cost of mortgages have gone down because of the conservatorship. They sure as hell haven't. You're looking at all these other, unintended consequences. For example, lack of innovation in mortgage products, like I talked about, lack of competition, of all these things. It's caused the cost of a house to increase, and then you add this government regulation. So if you want to look at what essentially is driving housing up and causing this sort of housing crisis, which I do believe is real, if you want to kind of ascertain really where the smoking guns lie, they're mostly on the government side. These are solvable problems, which is really good.
Yeah, it is really good.
Now, I have one other question, one other
What's
thought
that?
for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to talk about interest rates.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, you've been doing some homework on that.
Well, so what are the facts as we know it so far? We've all been hoping that rates would come down. They did a little bit last year, and when they did, they dropped below 7%. There was an immediate reaction. We did have more mortgage loan applications. The builders had a higher level of enthusiasm. More new starts happened. And then towards the end of the year, we went back up to 7. I think we're over 7 right now. It's bubbling around 7.1, 7.2, somewhere in there. And that has had a result of 10% fewer applications and sales first quarter this year. So we see a very direct correlation. Obviously, higher rates, fewer sales. Now, how do we combat that? So I'll talk about their present life right now, and then you can talk about what may happen, because this is also a topic of discussion that's out there with some of the things that Trump has said. Okay, so is it possible to close in today's environment with an interest rate significantly below the market rate of 7.1 to 7 point, maybe 7.25? Yes, it is. There are many. New construction is obviously the go-to place. We've done podcasts on a resale from a listing agent standpoint and from a seller standpoint. We have done podcasts several times in the past. You guys can look them up on YouTube, et cetera, about how to get the rate down as a resale. So set that aside for a second. There are many builders across the country who are doing things like down payment assistance. I see 3 to 5% given by the builder towards your down payment. A very common thing is a 2-1 rate buy down. I saw as low, I want to say it was either Pulte or KB, who is a huge national builder in both cases.
Julie,
it's closing at 3.99%.
Level off here. So let's tie up some loops, okay? Yeah. So let's say there are new mortgage products that are out there. Let's say Fannie and Freddie now have competition. Let's say, for example, now you can go to a new construction builder. You don't have to put any money down. Your interest rate's going to be bought down to, say, 3% or 4%.
Yep.
The builder is going to take a interest in the upside of the house. So the down payment that you would have otherwise had to put in, the builder's going to cover.
Yep.
Because they're also helping you out on the mortgage side of things. But they get a percent of the upside of the house if it were to sell for obviously more than you paid for it, which, inflation is going to pretty much lock that in. What will that do to the housing market? What will that do to new construction? What will that do, frankly, to new builder stocks and all the adjacent?
All good things.
All good things. What will that do to construction industry? What will that do to suppliers that make windows and doors and plumbing fixtures and all the rest of it? Do you guys see the power of essentially of deregulating?
Competition again. This is one of our ongoing themes that's being created on our Friday shows is the effects of allowing competition to happen. You can call it capitalism if you like, but competing products tend to bring the market, the quality of what you're getting up. So right now that's being created by builders on their own buying down rates. But to your point, if Fannie and Freddie are let loose and we have more competition on the mortgage market at large, then rates could come down. Different types of creative mortgages. People have thought about bringing back the 40-year to keep the payments down. There's lots of different stuff.
I think what you're going to see the most movement really truly is in equity participation, like what I've been describing.
Yes.
Because that makes the most sense.
The builders got part of the upside, or maybe you allow investors to partner together. Lots of different things.
It doesn't make sense that there's going to be enough resale homes coming for sale anytime soon to even come close to meeting demand. It doesn't make
unlikely.
sense. Yeah, it's unlikely because
we would have had it by now.
Yeah, most likely. You will see the generational shifts and things like that. But, baby boomers and all these things as they go to the, great shuffleboard, match in the sky. But the moral of the story is there's not going to be a big, huge slew of all of a sudden the resales increase. Now, with that said, in most markets there is more inventory for sale.
We do see more inventory, but rates are keeping sales suppressed.
But look where you and I have some investments in Austin, right?
Yep.
So you and I are invested in what was originally a luxury condo development, right, in downtown Austin.
Yep.
And for a variety of reasons, it's become a luxury rental apartment, and fortunately they're renting, did I tell you?
No, you updated, yeah.
Yeah, so
That's
we have an interest, and I I think it's 47 condos, I think.
New construction.
Yeah. In any event, that's an example where the reason that those had to go from being new construction spec homes to rentals is because Austin in particular, Texas, doesn't have a lot of regulation.
Yep.
And there was a lot of new construction that got built. Competition forced the economics of selling those units to no longer be viable and be feasible. So they now need to be made into rentals for 5 or 7 years. And then appreciation from inflation will make it so that then they're viable again. Then there's enough profit to justify selling them. But there's an example of where less regulation and more supply drove down prices.
That's right.
And that's what's going to have to happen in a lot of the country to really fix this housing problem. But how's that going to happen with the existing, essentially structures that are existing in many of these states? Like if you're in one of these states that has a large issue, well, I'm thinking of Pacific Palisades. I don't think there's any amount of chest pounding that's going to really fix the ridiculous amount of regulation that's in place that's ever going to, it's going to really, people are saying 5 to 10 years before those homes are built back. That's optimistic.
Right.
I bet you're going to see, because they're going to pass all these new regulations and all these new rules. And even it's happening in North Carolina. I don't know if you knew that, where the hurricanes happen.
Yep.
Now they're saying, well, you need to build a house on stilts, or you need to basically raise the foundation. And
well, we see it right down the street. How tall is that foundation because of Maria and the requirements they've got? I mean, they're starting at like 20 feet in the sky.
Right. So all of this, but really where we're going to see the most movement, and this is the expansive idea of like where we're hoping your brains all go, is where is the opportunity going to be? It's everywhere. That's really the moral of the story.
Yeah.
And we haven't even talked about the demographics and the huge amount of people that are making new humans, getting married, making babies, and they're all going to be wanting to buy homes and all the rest of it. We haven't even really touched on all of this because the fuel is just the logs on the fire are causing what was essentially a housing recovery to be a slow, sort of somber process. Now I think we're going to see something that's going to be really like we've never seen in history.
I think so too. And, most of our listeners are real estate professionals on some level, whether you're leasing agents or you're brokers or you're sales, agents. I think ultimately it's going to require more versatility and flexibility of the things that you know about, and an open mind to new types of products, whether those are mortgage products or literally different types of housing communities that are being built, different types of transactions that you're going to have to learn. To me, that's really exciting. What's
interesting, though, again, this is something that Trump said yesterday, is he's like the Federal Reserve. You guys should research that. I read a book. I forget who wrote it, but it's a really interesting book called The New Case for Gold. The part of it that's interesting is the history of the Federal Reserve. Really fascinating, guys. Got to read it. But the Federal Reserve, whether you know this or not, is not actually part of the government. It's an independent thing that essentially is in charge of the money supply and printing money. So the printing of the money is done by the Federal Reserve. And guess who the owners of the Federal Reserve are? Do your homework yourself if you don't believe me. They're the big banks. The biggest shareholders in the Federal Reserve are like JP Morgan and things like that. So the actual entity that essentially controls interest rates, for the most part, really they're predicting reading the tea leaves and then calling interest rates back based on their prognostication of what they think is going to happen in the economy, blah, 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 is an independent from the government agency, which I guess makes sense, but at the same time it doesn't make sense because we're relying on a bunch of wonks, God bless them, to be able to call the ball on what the future of the economy is going to do and what interest rates should be. And don't you think at this point, there's probably better ways to go about setting rates that a bunch of people who inevitably have their own biases, let alone political biases, to be sitting in a room that no one's really allowed to, be in part of and hear their debates and the whole thing about interest rates. Aren't we kind of at a point where it doesn't make sense anymore for something as important as interest rates to be controlled those? And yes, I know mortgage rates aren't directly controlled by the Federal Reserve, but when interest rates on other things go down, it's going to have a positive effect on the economy. People are going to be more optimistic and spend more money, which is going to cause an increase in housing demand, all these things, right? You guys see how this always stems back to really what the choke point almost always is. And this is really what this new administration is getting into the heart of. It's too much regulation. It's too much clamping down on innovation. It's having the incentive structures to really innovate and to build and to really, put America first. Those incentive structures have been removed for at least a generation, 10 years. They've been gone. They haven't really been. When was the last time? And if you're not our age, and I feel sorry for you not having an experience as an American where you did feel patriotic, where you did feel overtly proud. If anything, in these last couple generations, we've been told to not believe in the country, and like we're somehow, on the
patriotism is bad
and all this crap, right? Nationalism and all this other stuff, and we need to be some big globalistic. Why? And by the way, how has that worked out?
Right?
How was that a good idea? So we are the whole. There's so much insanity that has been played out. And now what we all need to do, whether you came from the blue side of the aisle or the red side of the aisle, is we need to get back into alignment. We need to protect the homeland. We need to protect our neighbors. We need to protect our real estate industry.
Our own economy.
We need to be thinking less about our own personal gripes and our own personal, I don't like the fact that this particular social cause is getting, not the respect and demand. Okay, well, let's rise above that. And let's realize what's actually at play. Because I got news for you. If all of a sudden the Panama Canal was choked off because China owns runs both parts of the entry and the exit, they run the entire Panama Canal. If all of a sudden they decided to choke off the Panama Canal, if all of a sudden we had a hot war someplace, if all of a sudden the homeland was attacked someplace, if all of a sudden all these other things that are kind of worst case scenarios started to play out, but they started to play out quickly, I got news for you. The last thing you're going to be worried about is the social causes that you think everyone should be focused on. You're going to be focused on the homeland. You're going to be focused on the economy. You're going to be focused on
your own personal economy.
You guys get it?
Yeah.
So we need to go back to fortifying not just the country's purse. We need to go back to fortifying the country's character. We need to go back to fortifying the meaning of being an American. And we do need to do mass deportations. We do need to. You can't have a country unless you have a shared wall, really, in essence. You can't have a country, for the most part, if you don't have a common language. You can't, if you don't have borders, if you don't have a common language, and yes,
if you don't enforce the things.
And yes, if you don't have a common religion.
Yeah.
You tell me one country in the history of forever, one city, one town that has survived without having enforced borders, without having a common language, without having a common religion. They don't exist. And that's what our country was founded on, wasn't it? Why can't we get back to those founding principles? What was so wrong with them? Nothing.
Exactly. Well, that's the pod, I think.
Yeah, that's the pod.
We talked about a lot of different things today, guys. We did warn you at the top of the podcast. This is our Fun Friday show where anything goes. For our regular listeners, we will return to our regular scheduling of most things real estate next week.
But this is all the stuff we talked about on our walks this week.
It is. I think there's probably a few more, but, we're getting a steady supply of new things to talk about. And we want to loop you guys into those discussions. So send us your comments, send us your requests. What do you want to talk about? What do you think about the things that we spoke about? Are there drones over your town? What do you think?
Well, I'm really waiting for Doge to start coming out with their list of things that they found or suggestions to essentially cut expenses in the government.
It'll be interesting.
That you and I will have our hilarious Doge thing of the week,
Yes, we'll have a Doge of the week.
It'll be amazing.
Yes,
so please do give us feedback. Let us know whether we're on track for this podcast. The amount of positive feedback we have had for the past few shows that we've done on Friday have been really overwhelming, encouraging, I have to say. And seems like we're right in alignment with the information, frankly, the way you guys are thinking as well. Julie and I are doing these podcasts because, frankly, it's cathartic for us. But also, we want this podcast every day, but especially on Friday, to feel like we're all, in your party to this conversation too. And we're all sort of sitting around a campfire or whatever. And we're all just sort of talking about whatever comes to mind. And we're kind of digging into it. And we're, dissecting it, putting it back together. And we're giving ourselves all an equal opportunity to hit hard reset on some of our probably outdated preconceived beliefs that we have about our country, about our own individual potential, about a lot of things. So if you're feeling in any way mired down with contempt, or if you're feeling in any way, really any, I think, form of depression, you need to really give yourself, I think, a blessing of allowing you to maybe set that aside and accept the fact that if you wake up and you're looking at the green side of the grass, right? You guys get it? That you are a blessed person, because you are. You are alive. You are breathing. If your life right now is not the way you want it to be, you can change it. And now in a meaningful way, the wind is very much going to be at your back if you choose for it to be, or you can basically, dig a deeper hole emotionally and financially, and you can let what will be probably the greatest time of your life and certainly our country to get by you. And this is very easy to do because there's a lot of people that are feeling that way because they don't want to take risks, because they don't want to, essentially make themselves
compete.
They don't want to make themselves have new thoughts. They don't want to actually have to, learn new things. They don't have to do new things. They just want to, they want to believe that their best days are behind them. And if that's true, then that means that the best days are behind for everyone. And anyone that's basically giving them countervailing thoughts, let alone emotional feelings about that, they're going to hate on those people. So if you are that person, or if you are surrounding yourself with people like that, those people are going to be nothing other than weights. They're going to pull you down. And then you're going to finally cut the weights, and you're going to pop up 10 years from now, and you're going to be really, it's going to be very sad because you're going to realize that could have been the best 10 years of your life. No matter how old you are, no matter what your background is, what your educational background is, you've got to realize that you are absolutely in the right place at the right time, and you've got to embrace this amazing gift that God gave you and make the most of it. This is what you've been waiting for. This very day, this very moment is what you've been waiting for. If you choose to think, feel, and take actions along those lines.
You can create your own golden era if you just engage in the discussion. Look how Tim created the, not really outline, but the back and forth of today, where he said, okay, let's talk about tariffs, but let's talk about both sides. Let's talk about Fannie and Freddie. Why would somebody want it released? Why would somebody not want it released? Have those discussions. Look at both sides. Investigate for your own sake so that you can create the content of your own character the way that you want it to be for your own golden era. You do have that kind of control. That's what I'm excited about.
And that's the reason I presented all those things, and Julie and I presented all those things. Even when we were talking about aliens, right? I was trying to give you guys both sides of it because you got to start seeing things from both sides. You might, as I started out the show today, you're not going to ever convince me that God isn't real. You're not ever going to convince me that traditional values and conservative principles are not going to be the superior way to have a good life. I mean, generally speaking, people that are religious-based have better outcomes in life than people that aren't. So doesn't it make sense to follow in the footsteps of people that are religious-based? And look what the entire country is doing. Look what the number one podcast in the world right now is religious-based, and it's called
365 Days of the Bible.
That's right. And his last name is Schmidt, right? Isn't it?
Yes, Father Mike Schmidt, I
Mike
think
Schmidt,
is right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go. That should tell you the direction that the world is going to go, because where the United States go, the world goes. So look where we're going. We have, I'm not even going to use emotionally triggered words, but the pendulum is absolutely swinging faster than, frankly, I would have imagined, back towards looking for or reconnecting with the soul of the individual and the soul of the country. And that's what we're experiencing. Embrace it. Don't fight it. You can run both sides of it. You can kind of look for them, okay, this is what I believe, and this is maybe why I'm wrong. Or turns out I rethought about why I believe the way I believe, and turns out I'm not just a little right about that. I was super right about that. Give yourself the grace of opening your mind, and no matter how old you are or how young you are, and then you will find yourself probably in perfect alignment with some of the thoughts and the feelings that Julie and I are trying to convey to you, that you are indeed in the right place at the right time, provided you take the right actions. So along those lines, please use this information to get yourself into action and be motivated and embrace whatever it's going to take for you to become the highest and best version of yourself as an individual, as a child of God, and as a real estate practitioner. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.